At 5 o'clock in the morning, just as the sky was beginning to pale, I was already tiptoeing out of bed, terrified of waking my son and daughter-in-law in the master bedroom next door. My 62-year-old body wasn't what it used to be. My joints felt like rusted door hinges, creaking in silent protest with every movement. I clenched my teeth and slowly straightened my back, fumbling for my coat in the dark. The bedroom, converted from a storage closet, was less than 70 square feet. After fitting in a twin bed and a small dresser, there was barely room to turn around. 3 months ago, I had gotten the call from my son David, telling me his wife, Chloe, was about to give birth. Without a second thought, I packed a suitcase and rushed from my small town in Ohio to the city of Chicago. At the time, Chloe had wrinkled her nose and mentioned they didn't have a spare room. David had hemmed and hawed before suggesting I could make do with the storage closet for a little while. "Mom, it's just temporary," he'd said then, "just until Chloe gets through the first couple of months." I had smiled and said it was no problem, but my heart felt a sharp prick, like being jabbed with a needle. This little north-facing room was cold and damp, but compared to making things difficult for my son, this small discomfort was nothing. In the kitchen, I skillfully rinsed rice and put it in the pot, then took out the red beans I had soaked the night before. Chloe was drained after giving birth, and I had specifically looked up recipes. Oatmeal with berries and cinnamon was the most nourishing thing I could think of. While the oatmeal simmered, I started preparing other ingredients. The whole chicken for the soup was an organic one. I had a relative from back home send specially, which I'd season with thyme and rosemary. The salmon had to be fresh to be delicious, and then there was the rice pudding Chloe had specifically asked for. The dough had to be made from scratch to be perfectly soft. "Mom, why are you up so early again?" My son, rubbing his eyes, appeared at the kitchen door, his voice a low whisper. I wiped my hands. "David, you should be sleeping. It's still early, isn't it? I just put the oatmeal on, so it will be ready for Chloe when she wakes up." My son glanced at his watch, his brow furrowing. "It's only 5. You can't keep getting so little sleep. When you get older, you don't need as much sleep anyway," I said, smiling to change the subject. "Don't you have to work today? Go get washed up. I'll make you some scrambled eggs." David looked like he wanted to say something more, but he just sighed. "Chloe's been a little on edge lately. Mom, please be patient with her." My hands paused for a moment over the dough I was kneading before I continued. "I know, it's like that after having a baby. Don't you worry, your mom knows what she's doing." After my son left, the kitchen fell silent again. The only sound, the soft bubbling of the oatmeal on the stove. The sky outside gradually brightened. I gazed at the pale dawn and thought back to 30 years ago, when I had my own baby. My mother-in-law had passed away long before, so it was my own mother who came from her small town to take care of me. Every day, the first thing my husband would do when he got home from work was ask if I had gotten enough rest. Now, times had changed. I was the mother-in-law, but there was no one left to ask me if I was tired. At 7:30, the oatmeal was cooked to perfection. I ladled a bowl out to cool and prepared a few simple side dishes. Just as I set breakfast on the table, the master bedroom door opened. Chloe walked out, holding the baby, her face dark. "Chloe, you're up. The oatmeal is still warm. You should eat it while it's hot." I hurried over, trying to take the baby from her. Chloe sidestepped my hands. "It's fine, I've got him. He just fell asleep, don't wake him up." I awkwardly pulled my hands back. "Then you should eat first. I'll watch the baby." "What did you make?" Chloe glanced at the dining table, her brow tightening even more. "Is that oatmeal with berries again? I told you I don't like sweet things for breakfast. It's good for your recovery," I explained. "I barely put any sugar in it. If you don't like it, I can make you an omelet right now. There's still filling in the fridge." Chloe waved her hand impatiently. "Forget it. I'll just eat whatever. It's not like anything you make tastes any different." I retreated silently to the side, watching as she stirred the oatmeal with her spoon, only managing a couple of bites before putting it down. My chest felt tight, as if stuffed with cotton, but I still forced a smile. "What would you like for lunch?" I was going to buy some fresh fish. "Whatever," Chloe said without looking up, her attention fixed on her phone. My son rushed through his breakfast and left for work. Before he left, all he said was, "Thanks for everything, Mom," without so much as a hug. I remember when he was little, he would wrap his arms around my neck every day before school and say, "Bye, Mommy." Now, even eye contact was rare. After clearing the breakfast dishes, I started cleaning the apartment. Chloe was allergic to dust, so I had to make the place spotless every day. I was on my knees wiping the floor when my phone rang. It was my old neighbor from back home, Brenda. "Helen, how's it going over at your son's place?" Brenda's loud voice boomed through the receiver. I glanced at the closed master bedroom door and lowered my voice. "It's going well. My grandson is just adorable." "Oh, come on," Brenda scoffed. "I know how hard these young daughters-in-law can be to deal with. You're just too nice. If I were you, I'd come home as soon as the first month is over. We're short on people in our dance class at the community center." I mumbled a few noncommittal replies and hung up. When I tried to stand, a sharp pain shot through my lower back, making me gasp. I had to lean against the wall for a long moment before I could straighten up. At noon, I made 4 dishes and a soup as usual, carefully placing them on the table. Chloe sat down, holding the baby, and poked at the spinach with her chopsticks. "This is so greasy. How am I supposed to eat this?" I skimmed all the fat off. "This is a ginseng and chicken soup. It's the best for milk production." I ladled a bowl of soup for her. Chloe reluctantly took a few sips, then suddenly pushed the bowl away. "It's too salty. Did you make this according to your generation's taste again? All the websites say new mothers need a bland diet." I was stunned. I hadn't even dared to put much salt in the soup. "Then I'll make you some simple zucchini soup instead. Zucchini is also good for milk." "Don't bother. I don't have an appetite," Chloe said, standing up. "I'll just order something from DoorDash. You can figure out your own lunch." Watching her back as she returned to the bedroom, I stood frozen, unsure whether to put down the soup ladle or keep holding it. In the end, I quietly cleared away the untouched meal and sat alone on a small stool in the kitchen, forcing down a few bites of cold rice. In the afternoon, while Chloe and the baby were napping, I hurried out to the grocery store. The March wind still carried a chill, but it felt warmer than the atmosphere inside the apartment. As I passed the community park, I saw several women my age playing with their grandchildren, their laughter carrying on the wind. I stopped and watched for a moment, a sharp pang of envy in my heart. On my way home, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my son. "Mom, Chloe said lunch wasn't to her taste. Please be more mindful in the future. She's very sensitive right now while she's nursing." I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling as I typed back, "Okay, Mom understands." I wanted to say more, but it felt pointless. I just sent a smiley face emoji. That evening, my son worked overtime and didn't get home until after 9 o'clock. I reheated the dinner for him. He ate while scrolling through his phone, occasionally asking how the baby was, but he never once asked how my day had been. Late at night, the baby's cries once again shattered the silence. I shot up from my bed like a reflex, threw on my coat, and ran towards the master bedroom. Pushing the door open, I saw Chloe impatiently patting the baby, muttering, "Why are you crying again?" "Let me," I said, reaching for my grandson. "You get some rest." "What are you doing?" Chloe's voice suddenly rose. "Barging in here in the middle of the night, you scared me to death." I froze. I heard the baby crying. "So what if he's crying? The doctor said you're not supposed to pick him up every time he cries. You'll spoil him." Chloe glared at me. "Your old-fashioned methods are completely outdated." Just then, my son woke up. He sat up groggily. "What's going on?" "Your mother is trying to interfere with how I raise my child again with her old ways," Chloe complained immediately. David rubbed his eyes, his tone reproachful. "Mom, how many times do I have to tell you? We use scientific methods for parenting now. Go back to sleep. Don't cause more trouble." I just wanted to help. My voice was a thin whisper, as if my throat was blocked. "We don't need it," Chloe said, her voice sharp and final. "And can you please not just come into our room whenever you want? This is my child." I took 2 steps back and gently closed the door. Back in my little storage closet, I sat on the edge of the bed. Moonlight streamed through the tiny window, casting a pale, cold patch on the floor. On the nightstand, the framed photo of my late husband and me stood silently. In the picture, he had a gentle smile, as if he were saying, "Helen, don't wear yourself out." "Oh, Robert," I whispered, tracing the edge of the frame, the tears finally falling. "Am I really just in the way? 30 years ago, when I gave birth to David, I had a hemorrhage and almost didn't make it." Robert knelt outside the delivery room, begging the doctors to save me. He told me later that in that moment, he realized how much I meant to him. Now, he's been gone for 10 years, and I've tried with all my might to be a good mother and a good mother-in-law, but it seems like everything I do is wrong. Wiping my tears, I took out the journal hidden under my pillow and wrote by the moonlight. March 15th, overcast. My grandson is 1 month old today. I made a special sweet bread, but Chloe said it was too sweet and didn't eat it. David was busy with work and didn't even finish the eggs I made him. The baby cried tonight. I went to help, but I was just told I was in the way. Robert, you always told me to put our son first, but I don't know how to do that anymore. Closing the journal, I curled up on the small bed, listening to the distant, occasional cries from the master bedroom, and lay awake all night. At 6 o'clock in the morning, Helen had already been quietly busy in the kitchen for an hour. She carefully skimmed the fat off the chicken and herb soup that had been simmering all night, then added fresh mushrooms to continue cooking on low heat. This was a special postpartum meal she had prepared for Chloe, said to help with recovery. "Mom, you're up so early again?" David walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. Seeing his mother's stooped figure busy at the stove, his brow furrowed unconsciously. Helen wiped the sweat from her forehead and turned with a smile. "David, you're awake. Go get washed up. I made a breakfast burrito for you. It's still warm." David glanced at his watch. It was only 6:20. "I don't leave until 7:30. He walked over to his mother, lifted the lid of the soup pot, and sniffed. "Is this for Chloe again? Didn't she say yesterday she didn't want anything so heavy?" I followed a recipe I found online this time. I skimmed off all the fat and added mushrooms, so it won't be heavy. Helen's voice softened, but her hands didn't stop moving. "Chloe is weak after giving birth. She needs to build up her strength." David looked like he wanted to say something, but ultimately just sighed. "Mom, don't wear yourself out. Chloe's been on edge lately, so please be patient with her." I know. Helen nodded repeatedly, but her heart felt another sharp prick. Her son's words were full of concern for his wife, but he never once asked if his own mother was tired. At 7 o'clock, Chloe came out of the bedroom holding the baby, looking even more exhausted than the day before. Helen quickly went to her. "Chloe, the soup is ready. Have some." Chloe glanced at the soup bowl on the table, and her brow immediately tightened. Who drinks something so heavy this early in the morning? She walked straight to the refrigerator, took out a carton of milk and a few slices of bread. "I'll get my own breakfast." Helen's hand, holding the soup bowl, froze in midair. After a long moment, she awkwardly put it down. Then what would you like for lunch? I can go buy a fresh salmon fillet." "Whatever," Chloe said without looking up, busy feeding the baby. David hurriedly finished his breakfast and left for work. Before leaving, he only said, "Thanks for everything, Mom," without even a hug. Helen stood at the door, watching her son's retreating back. She remembered how, when he was little, he would wrap his arms around her neck and say, "Bye, Mommy," every single day before school. Her eyes began to burn. After clearing the breakfast dishes, Helen began to clean the apartment. Chloe was allergic to dust, so she had to make the place spotless every day. Just as she was on her knees wiping the floor, the doorbell rang. "Helen, is that really you?" An elderly woman with white hair stood outside. It was Helen's old neighbor, Brenda. "I heard from the security guard in the lobby that you were here taking care of your daughter-in-law, so I came to see you." Helen quickly invited Brenda in, lowering her voice. "Chloe and the baby are napping. Let's keep it down." Brenda looked around the beautifully decorated apartment, her gaze falling on a small, closed door in the corner. "You're staying in there. Isn't that the storage closet?" Helen forced a smile. "It's just temporary. It's fine. It's quiet." Brenda pursed her lips and took a container out of her bag. "I brought you some of my homemade lasagna. It's your favorite, with the extra cheese." Taking the still warm container, Helen's eyes suddenly reddened. It had been so many years since anyone had remembered what she liked to eat. In all her time at her son's house, she had cooked all sorts of dishes that Chloe liked. But no one had ever asked her what she wanted to eat. "Helen," Brenda took her hand, her voice even lower. "You don't look so good. Are you too tired?" Helen shook her head. "Not at all. I couldn't be happier taking care of my grandson." "Oh, come on," Brenda scoffed. "I know how hard these young daughters-in-law are to deal with. My daughter had a baby last year, and I went to help for a month. It nearly gave me a heart attack." Helen wanted to argue, but she heard the baby crying from the master bedroom. She quickly stood up. "Chloe's awake. I'll go check." When she came back out after soothing the baby, she found Brenda in the kitchen, heating up the lasagna. "Come on, eat it while it's hot," Brenda called to her. "I looked in your fridge. It's full of supplements for your daughter-in-law, but nothing for you." Helen had just sat down and eaten 2 bites when Chloe came out holding the baby. She was clearly taken aback by the stranger. "Who is this? Chloe, you're awake?" "This is my old neighbor, Brenda. She came to visit me." Helen quickly introduced them. Chloe nodded as a greeting, but her eyes were fixed on the lasagna on the table. "Mom, didn't I tell you the baby is sensitive to garlic? Why are you eating that in the house?" Helen's hand trembled, and her fork almost fell. I didn't know." "Oh my, it's my fault," Brenda quickly interjected. "I brought this for Helen. I had no idea about the baby." Chloe didn't say anything else, just turned and went back into the bedroom, but the force with which she closed the door was noticeably louder than usual. Brenda sighed. "Helen, this is no way to live. If I were you, I'd go back home as soon as you can. The dance class at the community center is really missing you." Helen managed a weak smile. "It's just the postpartum hormones. Chloe will be fine after a while." After Brenda left, Helen discovered that Chloe had thrown the entire lasagna into the trash, container, and all. She stood in front of the trash can, looking at the still steaming lasagna, and the tears she had been holding back finally fell. When David came home from work, Chloe pulled him into the bedroom as soon as he walked in the door. Through the door, Helen could faintly hear her daughter-in-law's complaints. "Your mom had someone over without even telling me, and they were eating garlic lasagna." The baby cried all afternoon. Half an hour later, David knocked on the storage closet door. "Mom, Chloe said the baby is sensitive to garlic. Please don't eat it in the house anymore." Helen kept her head down. "I know, Mom. It was my fault." David hesitated, then just sighed. "Mom, don't take it too hard. Chloe's hormones are all over the place. Just be patient with her." "I understand," Helen forced a smile. "You should get some rest. You have work tomorrow." After closing the door, Helen sat on the edge of the bed. Moonlight streamed through the tiny window, casting a pale, cold patch on the floor. On the nightstand, the photo of her and her late husband stood silently, his gentle smile seeming to say, "Helen, don't wear yourself out." "Oh, Robert," she whispered, touching the frame, her voice choked with emotion. "Am I really just in the way?" The next morning, Helen got up at 5 as usual to prepare breakfast. She specifically made the pumpkin and millet porridge Chloe liked and stir-fried a few light side dishes. When Chloe came out with the baby, she nervously watched her daughter-in-law's expression. "Chloe, are you feeling any better today?" she asked cautiously. Chloe didn't answer, just glanced at the table. Porridge again. "I'm so sick of it." "Then what would you like?" "I'll make it for you right now," Helen said quickly. "Don't bother. I'll order something." Chloe took out her phone. "From now on, don't make breakfast for me. I'll handle it myself." Helen stood frozen, her hands clutching the dish rag tightly as she watched Chloe and the baby disappear back into the bedroom. After a long moment, she silently cleared away the untouched breakfast and sat alone on the small stool in the kitchen, forcing down a few spoonfuls of cold porridge. At noon, while Chloe and the baby were napping, Helen hurried out to the grocery store. The March wind still carried a chill, but it felt warmer than the atmosphere inside the apartment. As she passed the community park, she saw several women her age playing with their grandchildren. Their laughter carried on the wind, and she stopped to watch, her heart aching with a familiar envy. "Mrs. Miller, is that you?" a voice called from behind her. Helen turned to see a well-dressed, middle-aged woman looking at her with pleasant surprise. "Carol, is that you?" She recognized her as a former colleague from the school where she used to teach. It really is you, Carol said warmly, taking her hand. I heard you went to your son's to help with the new baby. I can't believe I ran into you here. They chatted for a few minutes, and Carol invited her to the Retired Teachers Association event next week. Our choir is looking for a lead singer, and you were always the golden voice of our school. Helen hesitated. I have to take care of my daughter-in-law and grandson. I probably don't have time. It's just for one morning, Carol urged. You should have a life of your own, too. Which building does your son live in? I can come pick you up. Helen vaguely avoided giving a direct answer, just saying she would think about it. After saying goodbye to Carol, she continued toward the grocery store, a long-forgotten sense of anticipation stirring in her heart. As she passed the community bulletin board, a flyer for the local community college's senior program caught her eye. She stood there for a long time, and when no one was looking, she quietly folded the flyer and put it in her pocket. On the way home, Helen's phone buzzed. It was a text from her son. Mom, Chloe said she wants spicy Cajun shrimp pasta for lunch. Remember to make it. She replied with a simple, okay, then added, David, there's a retired teachers event next week, Mom was thinking. She stopped, her fingers hovering over the screen. After a moment, she deleted the words she had typed and just sent back the okay. When she got home, Helen found that Chloe was already awake and watching TV in the living room. She quickly put down her grocery bags. Chloe, you're awake. I'll go make the pasta now. Don't bother, Chloe said without looking up. I already ordered takeout. Helen stood there, not knowing what to say. Just then, the baby started to cry. Her first instinct was to go and pick him up, but Chloe beat her to it. I'll get him, Chloe's tone was firm. The doctor said not to pick him up right away when he cries. You'll spoil him. Helen awkwardly retracted her hands. Then, I'll go start dinner. Walking into the kitchen, she realized her palms were sweaty. She took the crumpled community college flyer from her pocket, looked at it again, and finally, with a sigh, tucked it into the deepest compartment of her wallet. At dinner, David managed to come home on time for once. Helen had made his favorite pot roast and steamed fish, watching him with anticipation. David, try this fish. I picked it out special at the market today. She placed a piece of fish in her son's bowl. David nodded but then passed the piece of fish to Chloe. Chloe, you eat more. Chloe frowned. I ordered that shrimp pasta. I can't eat this much. Throughout the meal, David barely touched his food, preoccupied with answering work messages on his phone. When Helen cleared the table, she found that the dishes she had so carefully prepared were almost untouched. Later that night, Helen was once again awakened by the baby's crying. She tiptoed to the master bedroom door and heard Chloe's impatient shushing and David's groggy complaints. She raised her hand to knock, but then remembered Chloe saying not to pick him up every time he cried. In the end, she just stood outside the door, her heart breaking as she listened to her grandson's piercing cries. Back on her small bed, Helen tossed and turned, unable to sleep. She took out her journal and wrote by the moonlight, March 20th, overcast. I ran into Carol today. She invited me to a retired teacher's event. I hesitated, afraid of causing trouble for David. Robert, do you think I should go? Sometimes I feel like a complete stranger here, like I don't even have the right to hold my own grandson. Closing the journal, she looked out at the sliver of a moon in the sky and suddenly remembered something her husband used to say. Helen, you live your life once. You have to live a part of it for yourself. Helen was jolted awake by a sharp pain in her lower back. She struggled to get out of the narrow bed and saw it was only 4:30 in the morning. The world outside was still dark, with only the dim yellow glow of a streetlight filtering through the small window. She rubbed her aching back and tiptoed out of the storage closet. Her grandson had cried until midnight, and she had barely slept. As she passed the master bedroom, she paused, pressing her ear to the door. Hearing no movement inside, she continued to the kitchen. Today, she planned to make the sweet rice pudding Chloe had mentioned a few days ago, which was supposedly good for milk production. She carefully took out the fermented rice she had prepared the night before, kneaded a small ball of glutinous rice flour, and began rolling it into tiny balls. Mom, why are you up so early again? David's voice from behind her made her jump. and one of the small balls fell to the floor. "David, you scared me." Helen patted her chest. "I was thinking of making some rice pudding for Chloe. I heard it's good for milk production." David glanced at the clock. "It wasn't even 5. You should go back to sleep." He paused. "Oh, by the way, Chloe said her mom is coming to see the baby today, so you should prepare a few more dishes." Helen's hands stilled for a moment. "Your mother-in-law is coming?" "All right, I'll make some extra food." "Yeah, she'll be here this afternoon," David said and went to get washed up, not giving his mother another glance. Helen continued rolling the rice balls, a sense of unease creeping into her heart. The last time Chloe's mother, Sharon, had visited, she had been critical of everything, saying Helen was spoiling the baby. She wondered what she would find fault with this time. At 10 in the morning, Chloe finally emerged from the bedroom with the baby. Helen quickly served the freshly cooked rice pudding. "Chloe, eat it while it's hot. I followed a recipe I found online." Chloe took one bite and frowned. "It's too sweet, and the fermented taste is too strong." She pushed the bowl aside. "My mom is arriving at noon. She said she's taking us out to eat." "Oh," Helen was taken aback. "But I've already prepared all the ingredients." "You can eat it yourself," Chloe interrupted. "My mom rarely comes to visit. She wants to see her grandson." Helen silently cleared the dishes, her chest feeling heavy. The ingredients she had spent all morning preparing would now have to be stuffed into the refrigerator. At 1 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Helen opened it to find Sharon standing there, laden with shopping bags. "Sharon, you're here." "Come in," Helen said, quickly taking the bags from her. Sharon looked her up and down. "Helen, you don't look so well. Taking care of the baby must be tiring you out." "Not at all, not at all," Helen forced a smile. "I'm just so happy to be with my grandson." Sharon didn't say more and walked straight to her daughter. "Chloe, sweetie, Mom brought you some supplements. They're all imported, much better than those old-fashioned remedies your mother-in-law uses." Helen stood to the side, her smile frozen on her face. Chloe, however, acted as if she hadn't heard, excitedly looking through the things her mother had brought. "Mom, you know me so well. This is exactly what I wanted." David also joined them. "Thanks, Mom. You shouldn't have." Watching the three of them looking so happy together, Helen suddenly felt like an outsider. She quietly retreated to the kitchen and began to put away the food that no one would eat. "Mom, we're going out to eat now," David called from the doorway. "You can figure out your own dinner." Helen poked her head out of the kitchen. "Okay, you guys go ahead. Be safe." The sound of the door closing was exceptionally loud in the empty apartment. Helen stood in the middle of the kitchen, looking at the chopped vegetables and the simmering soup on the counter, and suddenly felt drained of all energy. She slowly slid to the floor, tears streaming silently down her face. She didn't know how long she sat there, but eventually she wiped her tears and decided to go for a walk. The March sun was warm and comforting on her skin. She wandered aimlessly through the complex, and before she knew it, she was at the children's playground. Several elderly people, about her age, were playing with their grandchildren, their laughter echoing in the air. "Grandma, push me higher," a little girl's cheerful voice called out. Helen stopped, watching the little girl on the swing being pushed by her grandmother, and her heart ached. When would her own grandson be able to call her grandma like that and ask her to play? "Mrs. Miller? Is that really you?" Helen turned and saw Carol again. This time, Carol was with a few other retired teachers, all of whom were her former colleagues. "We just finished our regular meeting for the Retired Teachers Association," Carol said warmly, taking her hand. "Have you thought about it? Can you come to the event next week?" The other teachers also gathered around, all warmly inviting her to join their activities. Looking at the kind, smiling faces of her old colleagues, Helen's nose suddenly tingled. I'm afraid I won't have time," she said softly. "It's just for one morning," Carol urged. "You should have a life of your own, too. Which building does your son live in? We can come pick you up." Under their enthusiastic persuasion, Helen finally nodded. "Okay, I'll go." She left her son's address, a long-forgotten sense of anticipation blooming in her heart. It was already 5 in the afternoon when she returned home. Opening the door, she heard Chloe and her mother laughing in the master bedroom. She tiptoed to the kitchen and started preparing dinner, even though she knew it was likely no one would eat it. Sure enough, at 6:30, David sent a text. "Mom, we're eating out. You can handle your own dinner." Helen replied with an okay and sat alone on the small kitchen stool, silently eating the leftovers from lunch. Just then, the master bedroom door opened and Chloe and her mother walked out. "Sharon, I cut some fruit. Have some." Helen quickly stood up. Sharon waved her hand. "No thanks. We just ate." She looked Helen up and down. "Helen, you've been wearing that sweater for a few days, haven't you? You need to be mindful of hygiene when you're around a baby." Helen looked down at the sweater she had worn twice, and her face flushed. I'll go change right now." "Mom," Chloe said suddenly, "you can sleep in the master bedroom with my mom tonight. David and I will take the sofa bed. That storage closet is too small. My mom won't be used to it." Helen was stunned. "Then, where do I sleep?" "You can just make do in the storage closet for one night," Chloe said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sharon chimed in. "That's right. My back is bad. I can't sleep on such a small bed." Helen stood there, feeling as if all the blood in her body had frozen. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "It's settled then," Chloe said, pulling her mother toward the master bedroom. "Mom, let me get you a new pair of pajamas." Helen watched them walk into the bedroom and close the door, and her tears began to flow again. She slowly walked back to the storage closet and sat on the small bed, looking at the photo of herself and her late husband, her heart twisting in pain. "Robert," she whispered, touching the frame, her voice choked. "Am I really that useless?" Late at night, Helen was awakened by the sound of voices. She tiptoed to the master bedroom door and heard Chloe and her mother talking. "Mom, you should stay a few more days," Chloe's voice said. "My mother-in-law doesn't know anything. All her methods for taking care of the baby are old-fashioned." "I can stay 3 days at most," Sharon replied. "Your father is home alone. I can't leave him for too long." "Then what should I do?" Chloe complained. "My mother-in-law can't even change a diaper properly and always uses her outdated methods." "Just put up with it," Sharon advised. "Once the first couple of months are over, send her back. You have to raise the child yourself. The elderly can't do it right." "That's what David said too." Chloe's voice was tinged with satisfaction. "He says his mom is uneducated and stubborn. If it weren't for the fact that she can help out, he would have sent her back to her small town a long time ago." Standing outside the door, Helen felt her entire body go cold. She couldn't believe her ears. These were the words of the son she had raised with all her love and effort. "Your mother-in-law has given you guys a lot of money over the years, hasn't she?" Sharon asked. "She did it willingly," Chloe said dismissively. "David is her only son. Who else would she give it to? Besides, what's that little bit of money? It's not even enough to buy a bathroom in this city." Helen clamped her hand over her mouth, afraid she would cry out. Over the years, she had given almost all her savings to her son for his house and wedding, while she herself lived in the old house her husband had left her, never even buying herself new clothes. "All right, don't think too much about it," Sharon comforted her daughter. "It'll get better when the baby is older. That old house your mother-in-law lives in is in a good location. It's bound to appreciate in value." Helen couldn't listen anymore. She stumbled back to the storage closet, closed the door, and sobbed silently. She finally understood. In the eyes of her son and daughter-in-law, she was nothing more than a free nanny, and an annoying one at that. The next morning, Helen still got up on time to prepare breakfast. She made the soy milk and fried dough sticks that Sharon liked, and also cooked some porridge. When the three of them came out of the master bedroom, she forced a smile. "Sharon, breakfast is ready." Sharon glanced at the table. "Oh, we're meeting Chloe's cousin for brunch. We won't be eating at home." Chloe added, "Mom, you can eat it yourself. We won't be back for lunch either." David didn't say a word the entire time. He just quickly drank a glass of soy milk and left with them. Helen stood at the dining table, looking at the full spread of breakfast that no one would eat, and suddenly felt dizzy. She held onto a chair and slowly sat down, her tears dripping into the bowl of porridge. In the afternoon, while they were all out, Helen took out her phone and called Carol. "Carol, about the event next week, I'll definitely be there. After hanging up, she took out the community college flyer from her wallet and read it carefully one more time. Finally, she dialed the number for the community college and inquired about registration. That evening, when David's family and Sharon returned, they found a lavish dinner on the table, but Helen was nowhere to be seen. There was a note on the table. "I went out to buy something. Dinner is on the table. Just heat it up." David frowned. "Where did Mom go?" "Who cares?" Chloe said nonchalantly. "Let's eat. The seafood my mom brought is getting cold." At that moment, Helen was sitting on a bench in the community park, watching the sunset. She held a new notebook in her hand and was writing in her journal, March 25th. Clear. Today I heard things I shouldn't have, and I finally understand my place. Robert, do you think it's time for me to live for myself? Closing the journal, she looked up at the sky. The evening clouds were exceptionally brilliant. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Helen was once again awakened by the baby's cries. She shot up from her bed reflexively, but her hand froze on the doorknob. The words she had overheard last night echoed in her ears. Uneducated and stubborn. Send her back home. Her hand slowly dropped. She returned to her small bed and covered her ears with a pillow, trying to block out the heart-wrenching cries. But the sound still seeped through, each sob a knife twisting in her heart. As dawn broke, the crying finally stopped. Helen wearily got up and tiptoed to the kitchen to start breakfast. Today, she was going to make one last attempt. If it was still. "Mom, why are you up so early?" David walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, and saw his mother kneading dough. Without looking up, Helen said, "I thought I'd make some dumplings for Chloe. She mentioned wanting some last time." David glanced at the clock. It was only 5. "You should go back to sleep." He paused. "By the way, Chloe's mom is leaving this afternoon, so you should make a few extra dishes." "Okay," Helen replied curtly, her hands never stopping. David seemed to sense something was off. "Mom, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Helen forced a smile. "Go get washed up. You have to go to work soon." David gave his mother a suspicious look before turning and going to the bathroom. Helen continued to make the dumplings, pinching each one with extra care. This would be the last meal she would cook for her son's family, and she wanted it to be perfect. At 7:30, Chloe and her mother came out of the master bedroom and were visibly surprised to see the dumplings on the table. "Chloe, I made your favorite shrimp and pork dumplings," Helen said, forcing a smile. "Eat them while they're hot." Chloe hesitated for a moment, then picked one up and tried it. "They're okay, I guess." She turned to her mother. "Mom, you try one." Sharon ate one and nodded. "Helen, your skills are not bad." Helen stood to the side, a mix of emotions swirling inside her as she watched them eat her dumplings. This was the first time in all these days that her daughter-in-law had given her any sort of approval, and it was on the day she had decided to leave. In the morning, while Chloe and her mother went out shopping, Helen began to pack her things. There wasn't much to pack. She had only brought a small suitcase. She cleaned the storage closet until it was spotless, not leaving a single hair behind. At 3 in the afternoon, Sharon was ready to leave. Helen stood at the door and politely saw her off. "Sharon, travel safely." Sharon nodded. "Thank you for your hard work, Helen. Take care of yourself." Helen smiled but said nothing. She knew this was the last time they would see each other. That evening, David came home on time for once. Helen had prepared a feast, his favorite pot roast, steamed fish, and the hot and sour soup Chloe liked. "Mom, what's the occasion? Why so much food?" David asked, surprised. Helen smiled. "No reason. I just felt like cooking." Even Chloe offered a rare compliment. "It smells really good." The meal was relatively peaceful. David even served his mother food several times. Helen looked at her son's familiar yet distant face, a pang of sorrow in her heart. This was the child she had raised, yet he had become someone else's husband, someone else's father, but no longer her son. After dinner, Helen insisted on clearing the dishes and even cut fruit for everyone. As she carried the fruit platter into the living room, she heard Chloe talking to David. "Honey, the baby is getting bigger. We need to clear out the storage closet to make it a nursery." Chloe's voice was clear. David hesitated. Then where will Mom sleep? She's supposed to go home after the first couple of months anyway, Chloe said dismissively. We can take care of the baby ourselves. Helen stood at the kitchen doorway, the fruit platter trembling in her hands. She took a deep breath and walked out. Have some fruit. Chloe glanced at her and said suddenly, Mom, the baby needs more space. We're planning to turn the storage closet into a nursery. For tonight, you can just sleep in the hallway. It's only for a few days. Helen froze, the fruit platter nearly slipping from her grasp. She looked at her son, hoping he would say something, but David avoided her gaze and mumbled, Mom, just make do. The baby really does need the space. Helen felt her entire body go numb. She slowly put down the fruit platter, her voice barely a whisper. Okay, I'll go get my things. When she came out of the storage closet with her bedding, David was waiting in the hallway. He handed her a pillow. Mom, it's just for a few days. You. Helen took the pillow, but then heard Chloe call from the bedroom. David, the baby's crying again. David turned to go, but then looked back and added, Mom, have some self-awareness. Don't always try to interfere in our lives. That sentence was the last straw, crushing the final shred of hope in Helen's heart. She stood in the hallway, clutching her bedding, watching her son's retreating back as tears streamed silently down her face. Late at night, Helen lay on the makeshift bed in the hallway, tossing and turning. Moonlight shone through the window, casting dappled shadows on the floor. She took out her phone and checked the time. 2 a.m. In a few more hours, the sun would rise. She quietly got up and walked to the storage closet, gently pushing the door open. By the moonlight, she looked at the small space she had lived in for nearly 2 months, her heart filled with a complex mix of emotions. Here, she had endured the most humiliating days of her life and also faced the cruelest truth. Returning to the hallway, she took out the small notebook she always carried and began to write a letter. She wrote and paused, tears blurring her vision several times. After finishing the letter, she folded it, placed it in an envelope, and then took out another small notebook. This was her ledger from over the years, recording every penny she had given to her son. At 4 a.m, Helen had quietly packed her suitcase. She took one last look at the closed master bedroom door, placed the letter and the ledger in a prominent spot on the dining table, and then, pulling her suitcase, gently closed the front door behind her. As the elevator descended, Helen felt her heart sink with it. But when the doors opened on the ground floor, an unprecedented sense of relief washed over her. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the apartment building. The sky was already turning a pale gray. A new day was about to begin. Helen hailed a cab. To the train station, please. As the taxi drove away from the complex, she took one last look back at her son's window. It was still dark. No one had noticed she was gone, and no one would care. On the train, watching the scenery fly by, Helen's tears finally broke free. She took out her phone and sent one last text message to her son. David, Mom is going home. Please read the letter and look at the ledger on the table. Take care. After sending the message, she turned off her phone. From now on, she would live for herself. Meanwhile, at David's home, David, where's your mom? Chloe's shriek broke the morning silence. David groggily sat up. What's wrong? Your mom is gone. Chloe pointed to the empty hallway. All her things are gone. Only then did David realize that the bed his mother had slept on last night was neatly cleared, as if no one had ever been there. He ran to the storage closet and threw open the door. Inside, it was pristine, without a single trace of his mother ever having lived there. Over here! Chloe had found a letter and a ledger on the dining table. With trembling hands, David opened the letter. It was his mother's familiar handwriting. David, by the time you read this, I will be on my way home. I have thought a lot these past few days. I always believed that if I gave you my whole heart, I would earn your love and respect in return. But now I understand that some things can't be forced. I don't blame you, really. It's my fault for not teaching you better, for making you feel that a mother's sacrifice is something to be taken for granted. The money recorded in the ledger, I never expected you to pay it back. I just wanted you to know how I've lived all these years. I am old now, and I don't have many years left. I want to live for myself for once. Don't worry, I will take care of myself. You need to live your life well, too. That's all. The train is about to leave. Mom. David's hands shook as he looked at the ledger, his face growing paler and paler. It meticulously recorded every sum of money his mother had given him over the years. Down payment on the condo, $50,000. Renovations, $25,000. Wedding, $15,000. Monthly living expenses, $300. On the last page, it read, second mortgage on the old house, $30,000, due next year. So much. David's hands started to tremble. Where did Mom get so much money? Chloe leaned over to look. It's only a few $100,000. What's the big deal? David whipped his head up, his eyes bloodshot. My mom's pension is only $500 a month. This money was her entire life savings, and the survivor benefits Dad left her. He suddenly remembered something and rushed into the storage closet, frantically searching. Finally, in a corner, he found the small notebook his mother always carried with her. It was her journal. With trembling hands, David opened it to the last page. It was dated March 30th, overcast. Today David told me to sleep in the hallway. He told me to have some self-awareness. Robert, do you think it's time for me to leave? For years, I gave them everything I had, and in return, I don't even have a place for a bed. I miss you. David knelt on the floor and finally broke down, sobbing. At 6 o'clock in the morning, Helen dragged her suitcase out of the small-town train station. The March morning air was still crisp, but she took a deep breath, feeling as if she had been reborn. Need a ride, ma'am? A taxi driver called out warmly. Helen nodded. To the old part of town, on Pine Street. The taxi wound through familiar streets. The sycamore trees lining the road were already sprouting tender green buds. Helen gazed at the passing scenery, a long-lost feeling of warmth filling her heart. This was the place where she had lived for most of her life. Every street corner held a memory. The car stopped in front of an old residential building. Helen paid the fare and dragged her suitcase inside. The familiar smell of coal dust in the hallway and the clutter piled by her neighbors' doors gave her an inexplicable sense of peace. Third floor, on the right. The familiar green metal door came into view. Helen fumbled in the depths of her purse for her key, her hand trembling slightly. She inserted the key into the lock, gave it a gentle turn, and with a click, the door opened. A wave of musty air washed over her. Helen stood in the doorway, looking at the home where she and her late husband had lived for 30 years, and tears streamed down her face. The furniture in the living room was arranged just as it had been when Robert passed away 10 years ago, only now everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. She put down her suitcase, walked over to Robert's portrait, and gently wiped the frame. Robert, I'm home. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the curtains, casting a golden ray on the picture frame. Helen could almost see her late husband smiling at her from the photo. For the next few hours, she threw herself into cleaning. Wiping windows, mopping floors, washing curtains, sweat soaked through her clothes. But her heart felt an indescribable sense of release. This was her own home. Every inch of it belonged to her. She didn't have to walk on eggshells for anyone. By noon, the house was finally clean again. Helen took a hot shower, changed into fresh clothes, and then cooked herself a bowl of noodles. It was the first meal she had made for herself in months. She had only taken a couple of bites when the doorbell rang. Puzzled, Helen opened the door to see her neighbor, Linda, standing outside, her face lit with surprise. Helen, you're really back. I saw your window open from downstairs and thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Linda, Helen smiled in greeting. Come on in. Linda looked her up and down. You've lost so much weight. Did things not go well at your son's? Helen's smile faltered for a second before she shook her head. Everything was fine. I just missed home. Linda seemed to sense something but didn't press. Well, it's good you're back. The community college is starting new classes next week. Have you signed up? The community college. Helen remembered the flyer she had carefully saved. I was just planning to look into it. They chatted for a while, and as Linda was leaving, she said, Come over for dinner tonight. My daughter and grandson are coming over. Helen was about to decline, but the word grandson made her heart ache. She nodded. Okay, I'll be there. After closing the door, Helen returned to the table and found her noodles had gone cold. She reheated them and finished the bowl in silence. As she was washing the dishes, her phone rang. It was her son. Helen stared at the name David on the screen, her finger hovering over the answer button, hesitating. The phone rang, stopped, rang again, and after the third time, it finally fell silent. She let out a long breath, but also felt a pang of disappointment. Putting the phone down, she walked over to her desk, took out the community college flyer from a drawer, and began to read it carefully. At 3 p.m, Helen arrived at the county community college. The campus wasn't large, but it was green and peaceful. A few elderly people with white hair were chatting on a bench under a long porch, their laughter carrying on the breeze. I'd like to register for a class, Helen said, a little nervously, at the admissions office. A staff member greeted her warmly. Of course, ma'am. What class are you interested in? We have calligraphy, painting, dance, music. Helen's eyes were drawn to a traditional ink wash painting on the wall. What class is that? That's a piece by a student in our Chinese brush painting class, the staff member explained. Are you interested in painting? Helen nodded. When she was young, she had loved to draw, but after getting married, she was so busy with work and family that the hobby had long been forgotten. After she filled out the registration form, the staff member said, Classes start next Monday. Please remember to bring your painting supplies. Leaving the community college, Helen felt much lighter. On her way home, she stopped by the supermarket to pick up some groceries and essentials. As she passed the baby aisle, she couldn't help but stop, looking at the adorable little clothes, her grandson's smiling face flashing before her eyes. My baby, she whispered to herself, then shook her head and quickly walked away. Back home, Helen began to unpack her suitcase. When she pulled out her journal from the bottom, she hesitated for a moment before opening it. The last entry chronicled that painful night being kicked out of the bedroom, her son's words about having self-awareness. She picked up her pen and, on a new page, wrote, April 1st, clear. I came home today and signed up for a painting class at the community college. Robert, you were right. I should live for myself for once. It's just, I still miss my little grandson. Her pen paused, and a tear fell onto the page, smudging the fresh ink. In the evening, Helen went to Linda's house as promised. As soon as she walked in, a little boy, about 3 or 4 years old, ran right into her. Hello, Grandma, the little boy said, looking up at her with a sweet smile. That one word, Grandma, made Helen's heart squeeze. She knelt down and gently stroked the boy's head. Hello there, little one. This is my grandson, Leo, Linda's daughter said with a smile. Leo, say hello to Grandma Helen. Grandma Helen? Leo said brightly, then asked curiously, Are you my grandma's friend? Helen nodded. Yes, we're very good friends. Leo suddenly grabbed her hand. Grandma Helen, can you tell me a story? I'm tired of all my grandma's stories. Everyone laughed. Helen looked at the child's innocent, smiling face and thought of her own grandson. He would be 3 months old by now. Would he be this cute? At dinner, Linda's family was incredibly welcoming. Leo insisted on sitting next to her, constantly chattering away. Helen patiently answered all his questions, but her heart ached. If only her own grandson could be this close to her. Helen, Linda said, placing a piece of fish on her plate. Now that you're back, are you staying for good? Helen shook her head. I'm not leaving again. This is my home. That's wonderful, Linda said happily. Our choir at the community college is looking for a lead singer. With your beautiful voice, you'd be perfect. After dinner, Leo insisted that Grandma Helen tell him a story. Helen sat on the sofa, holding the little boy in her lap, and began the story of Little Red Riding Hood. It was the same story she had told her son 30 years ago. She was surprised she still remembered it so clearly. And then what happened? And then? Leo was completely engrossed, constantly asking for more. Helen smiled and continued, but in her heart, she was thinking, if only my son could bring my grandson to see me, I could tell him stories just like this. It was after 9 o'clock when she got home. Helen washed up and got into bed, but couldn't fall asleep. She picked up her phone and saw 3 missed calls and several text messages, all from her son. Mom, Where are you? Please answer the phone. Mom, I know I was wrong. Please come back. Mom, Chloe regrets it too. We really need you. Helen looked at the messages, a mix of emotions churning inside her. She wanted to reply, but she didn't know what to say. In the end, she just sent back a single line. I'm home. You two live your lives. Don't worry about me. After sending the message, she turned off her phone. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a silvery glow on the wall. Helen stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. This was the first day of her new life. Although her heart was still heavy with worry, she knew she had made the right decision. The next morning, Helen was awakened by the sunlight. She stretched, suddenly realizing it was the first time in 2 months she had slept until she naturally woke up. There were no baby cries, no daughter-in-law's complaints, no son's reproaches, only the chirping of birds outside and the faint sounds of the distant morning market. She slowly got out of bed, made herself a bowl of oatmeal, and fried an egg. After breakfast, she decided to go to the farmer's market to buy some fresh vegetables and meat. The market was bustling with people, and the familiar local accents made Helen feel a comforting sense of belonging. A few old neighbors recognized her and greeted her warmly. The woman selling vegetables even insisted on giving her a free bunch of fresh bok choy. Helen couldn't refuse and accepted it with a warm heart. This is what home felt like. People remembered you, cared about you, instead of treating you like a free maid. Back home, as she was starting to prepare lunch, the doorbell rang. Helen wiped her hands and went to the door. Who is it? Mom, it's me. The voice from outside made Helen freeze. It was her son. She took a deep breath and slowly opened the door. David stood there, his eyes red and swollen, carrying a large bag. Mom! The moment David saw his mother, the tears started to fall. I'm so sorry. Helen stood in the doorway, not immediately letting him in. She looked at the child she had raised with so much love and effort, her heart a mix of pain and anger. How did you find me? I went to the school where you used to work. Carol told me you might have come home, David said, his voice choked. Mom, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Helen sighed and stepped aside to let him in. As soon as David entered, he knelt on the floor. Mom hit me, scolded me. I'm not human. Seeing her son crying so wretchedly, Helen's eyes also reddened, but she didn't immediately forgive him as she would have in the past. Instead, she said calmly, Get up, the floor is cold. David stood up and took a picture frame out of the bag. Mom, I brought the photo of you and Dad. And your journal. Helen took the frame and gently stroked the image of her late husband's smiling face. You read my journal. David lowered his head in shame. I did. Mom, I didn't know you were so unhappy. I'm a monster. David? Helen looked at her son, her voice soft. I don't blame you. Really. It's my fault for not teaching you better, for making you feel that a mother's sacrifice is something to be taken for granted. No, it's not your fault, David said emotionally. It was me. I was so blind, listening to Chloe, and treating you. He couldn't go on and started crying again. Helen poured him a glass of water. Drink some water. Have you eaten? David shook his head. I can't eat. You still have to eat, Helen said, turning towards the kitchen. I'll make you a bowl of noodles. David followed her to the kitchen doorway and watched his mother's busy figure. Suddenly, he said, Mom, please come back with me. Chloe really knows she was wrong. Helen's hands paused for a moment before she continued chopping the green onions. David, I'm not going back. Why? David was desperate. We really need you. The baby has been crying nonstop for 2 days. Chloe is sick with exhaustion. Helen turned around and looked at her son calmly. So, what you need is a nanny, not a mother, right? David was stunned, then lowered his head in shame. No, that's not it. David, Helen said softly. I'm old now, and I don't have many years left. I want to live for myself for once. Don't worry, I will take care of myself. Then, when will you come back to visit? David asked cautiously. Helen shook her head. I won't be back for a while. If you miss me, you can bring the baby here to see me. David wanted to say more, but seeing the firm look in his mother's eyes, he finally just nodded. At lunch, David devoured the noodles his mother made, crying as he ate. "Mom, your noodles are so good. I haven't had noodles this good in so long." Helen looked at her son, her heart a mix of pity and helplessness. This man, who was already a father, was still like a child in front of her. In the afternoon, David had to leave. Before he went, he begged his mother for forgiveness again and again and promised to bring the baby to visit often. After seeing him off, Helen stood by the window, watching her son's retreating figure, and the tears finally came. She knew that her son was truly sorry this time, but she couldn't just unconditionally forgive and give everything again. Some wounds take time to heal, and some relationships need distance to mend. That evening, Helen took out her new painting supplies and began to practice basic brushstrokes. Though her hand was a bit shaky and her lines weren't smooth, she was completely absorbed. This was the beginning of her new life. It was a late start, but it was better than never starting at all. Before bed, she wrote in her journal, April 2nd, clear. David came to see me today. He cried so hard. Robert, do you think I should forgive him? I think I'll wait and see. Tomorrow I'm going to buy some flower seeds and fix up the balcony. Spring is here. It's time to plant some flowers. After writing, she closed the book, turned off the light, and went to sleep. The gentle moonlight fell on her bed, like her late husband's hand, softly patting her to sleep. 3 months later, the summer sun streamed into the community college's exhibition hall. Helen stood in front of her ink wash painting, her fingers gently tracing the edge of the frame. This piece, titled New Life in the Spring Mountains, had taken her 2 months to complete and was now the centerpiece of the retired teacher's art exhibition. Helen, your paintings are getting more and more profound, Carol said, walking over and handing her a cup of tea. Especially the use of empty space here. It's so full of meaning. Helen took the cup and smiled modestly. I'm still learning. It's all thanks to Mr. Peterson's guidance. You're too humble, Carol said in a lower voice. I heard that an expert from the Arts Council saw your painting and wants to invite you to participate in a joint exhibition next month. Helen's eyes widened in surprise. Really? But I've only been learning for a few months. Talent has nothing to do with how long you've been learning, a cheerful voice said from behind her. Helen turned to see her painting instructor, Mr. Peterson, walking towards her with a smile. Helen, I've already recommended this painting of yours to the city's senior program. They want to invite you to be a guest lecturer. Helen's hand trembled, and she almost spilled her tea. Me? A teacher? No, I'm just a beginner. You'd be more than qualified to teach retirees, Mr. Peterson insisted. You have over 30 years of experience teaching English. Teaching a basic painting class would be a perfect fit. Helen was about to refuse again when the door to the exhibition hall was pushed open. A familiar figure walked in. She looked closer and saw it was her son, David. He was dressed in a formal shirt and slacks, holding a bouquet of flowers and looking around the room awkwardly. David? Helen called out in surprise. David's face lit up when he saw his mother, and he walked over quickly. Mom, I came to see your art show. He handed her the flowers. Congratulations. Helen took the bouquet, momentarily at a loss for words. For the past 3 months, her son had called every week, but he had never come to see his painting. Today, what was this? Who is this? Carol asked curiously. This is my son, David, Helen introduced them. David, this is Carol, my former colleague. David shook her hand politely. Nice to meet you, Carol. Thank you for taking care of my mother. Carol gave him a meaningful look. Your mother is the star student here now. Not only is she a great painter, but she's also organized a volunteer tutoring program for at-risk kids. Just last week, she gave a wonderful literature lesson. David looked at his mother in astonishment. Mom, you're that busy? Helen felt a little embarrassed. It's just some small things to pass the time. It's not small at all, Mr. Peterson interjected. Helen's tutoring sessions are always packed. Even the local TV station came to interview her. David's expression grew more complex. He carefully studied his mother's painting and said softly, Mom, this is really good. I never knew you could paint. I learned a little when I was young, Helen replied softly. But then I got busy with work and family, so I put it aside. David lowered his head, his voice choked. Mom, I'm so sorry. I used to. Let's not talk about the past, Helen said, patting her son's hand. Come, let me show you my paintings. After the exhibition, Helen took her son to a small restaurant near the community college. David looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. Is work very busy lately? Helen asked, placing a piece of fish on his plate. David shook his head. It's okay. It's just... He hesitated. The baby has been crying a lot at night, and Chloe is having a hard time. Helen's hand paused. He's 6 months old now, right? He's probably teething. Mom, David suddenly grabbed his mother's hand. Can you come back and help us? Just for a few days. Chloe is really exhausted. Helen looked at her son's pleading eyes, her heart aching, but she gently pulled her hand away. David, I have my own life now. You can hire a nanny. We did, David said urgently. We've been through 3 of them, and Chloe isn't happy with any of them. She says they're not professional enough. Only you, David. Helen interrupted him. It's not that I'm being heartless, but it wouldn't be good for anyone if I went back. You two need to learn to take care of the baby yourselves. David's shoulders slumped. Mom, are you still angry with me? Helen shook her head. I'm not angry anymore. But I can't go back to the way things were. I have my classes, my tutoring, and next week I have to go to the city for the art exhibition. The art exhibition? David looked up. The one Carol mentioned? Yes, Helen nodded. Mr. Peterson recommended me. I wasn't going to go, but... Mom, that's amazing, David said suddenly, his eyes shining with sincerity. I'm so proud to have a mother like you. Those words made Helen's eyes well up instantly. She lowered her head to hide her emotions. Hurry up and eat. The food is getting cold. After the meal, David insisted on driving his mother home. On the way, he said hesitantly, Mom, actually, I came today because I wanted to ask you for a favor. Helen glanced at him. What is it? Next week is the baby's 6-month birthday, David said cautiously. We want to have a small party. Can you come? Helen's steps slowed. She desperately wanted to see her grandson, but she was afraid of returning to that environment. It's just for one meal, David added quickly. You don't have to stay over. I'll drive you there and back myself. Chloe really misses you too. Helen knew her son was lying. How could Chloe miss her? But the thought of her 6-month-old grandson softened her heart. All right, I'll go, but just for the meal. That's great. Thank you, Mom. David was overjoyed. Back home, Helen stood on the balcony, watching her son's car drive away, her heart a mix of emotions. In these 3 months, she had rediscovered her long-lost sense of self-worth. She was no longer just someone's mother or mother-in-law, but Helen herself. But the ties of family were hard to sever, especially her connection to the little grandson she had only cared for 2 months. Robert, she whispered into the empty air. Should I go? A gentle breeze rustled past, bringing a hint of coolness. Helen went back inside and took a photo album from the bookshelf. It was the only thing she had taken from her son's house that was related to her grandson, a few photos taken on her phone. She gently stroked the baby's face in the pictures, and a tear slid silently down her cheek. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Helen opened it to find Mr. Peterson standing there, holding an exquisite box. Helen, sorry to bother you, Mr. Peterson said with a smile. This is the invitation from the City Arts Council. I was in the area, so I brought it over. Helen quickly thanked him and invited him in for tea. Mr. Peterson was the painting instructor at the community college, in his early 60s, and a retired professor from the city's Art Institute. He was cheerful and a very effective teacher, well liked by the students. Helen, have you thought about it? Mr. Peterson asked after taking a sip of tea. The offer to teach a class at the city's senior center. Helen hesitated. I'm worried I'm not skilled enough. You're too humble, Mr. Peterson laughed. Your progress is there for everyone to see. Actually, he paused. I have to go to a conference in Boston next week, and I need a substitute teacher. I was wondering. Helen finally understood his intention. You want me to substitute for you? Just for 3 classes, Mr. Peterson said earnestly. The students all love you. Please, just do it as a favor for me. Faced with his sincere request, Helen couldn't refuse and agreed. After he left, she suddenly remembered she had promised her son she would attend her grandson's party. She quickly called Mr. Peterson to explain. No problem, he said cheerfully. I'll move the Wednesday class to Tuesday. You can come in on Thursday and Friday. With the problem solved, Helen felt relieved. She opened the syllabus Mr. Peterson had left and began to prepare her lesson. Even though it was just substituting, she didn't want to disappoint the students. For the next few days, Helen immersed herself in lesson planning. She read through numerous painting textbooks, practiced the techniques she was going to teach over and over, and even stayed up late to create teaching aids. The feeling of being busy and productive reminded her of her early days as a teacher. On Thursday morning, Helen arrived at the community college early. The classroom was already full of students, who all greeted her warmly when she walked in. Mrs. Miller, we heard you're going to have a show in the city. That's amazing. Mrs. Miller, I really love your new life in the Spring Mountains. Can you teach us how to paint that? Faced with their enthusiasm, Helen's initial nervousness gradually faded. She followed her lesson plan, starting with the very basics of holding the brush and then demonstrating how to paint a plum blossom branch. In this style of painting, the idea must come before the brush, she explained as she painted. You must have the composition in your mind before you start, so you can complete it in one fluid motion. The students practiced diligently, asking questions from time to time. Helen patiently answered each one, walking around the room to give individual guidance. By the end of the 2 classes, her throat was dry, but her heart was full of a sense of accomplishment. After class, several students surrounded her, praising her teaching. Mrs. Miller, you explain things even more clearly than Mr. Peterson. Yes, you make complicated techniques so easy to understand. You're amazing. Mrs. Miller, will you be teaching us again? Helen smiled and shook her head. I'm just a substitute. Mr. Peterson will be back next week. That's such a shame, an elderly woman said with regret. We wish you could teach us all the time. On the way home, Helen's steps were light. She never expected to have made so much progress in just a few months, let alone to be standing in front of a classroom again. Even though it was just a substitute position at a community college, the feeling of being needed and appreciated had restored her long-lost confidence. Friday's class went just as smoothly. After class, Mr. Peterson called her specifically to say that the students were full of praise for her and hoped she would substitute more often. Helen, you have a real gift for teaching, he said sincerely. Have you considered becoming a regular instructor here? The pay isn't high, but Helen politely declined. Thank you for the kind offer, but I'm very happy with my life right now. I don't want to put too much pressure on myself. After hanging up, Helen sat at her desk and began to prepare the piece for next week's exhibition. She decided to paint a new landscape with the theme of rebirth, the rebirth of her artistic career, and the rebirth of her life. On Sunday evening, as Helen was packing the things she would take to her son's house the next day, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. She opened the door to find her son's family of 3 standing outside. Chloe was holding the baby, her face pale and her eyes red and swollen, as if she had been crying. David stood beside her, looking awkward. Mom, David said softly. We came to pick you up early. Helen was stunned, but we agreed on tomorrow. Chloe suddenly stepped forward, her voice choked. Mom, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. And with that, she knelt on the floor. Helen was shocked and rushed to help her up. What are you doing? Get up. But Chloe refused to get up, crying. Mom, I read your journal and the ledger. I'm not human. The baby in her arms was startled and began to cry as well. Helen's heart ached. She took her grandson from Chloe. Let's go inside first. Once inside, Chloe cried even harder. She haltingly described the chaos at home over the past few months. They had gone through 4 nannies, none of whom were satisfactory, and the baby cried incessantly at night. She and David fought constantly. Mom, Chloe sobbed, I never knew how hard it is to raise a child. How did you manage to raise David all by yourself? Helen gently patted her grandson's back, not answering. In her arms, the baby gradually quieted down, looking up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mom," David said, his eyes red, "we really know we were wrong. These past few months, I've been thinking about you every day, thinking about your cooking, about the things you used to say." Chloe took an envelope out of her bag. "Mom, this is the money you gave us. We want to pay you back." Helen shook her head. "I gave that to you willingly. You don't need to pay it back." "No," Chloe insisted. "We went through the records. You even gave us Dad's survivor benefits. We're not human." She started crying again. Helen sighed. "Let the past be the past. I'm just glad you've realized your mistakes." "Then, will you come back to live with us?" David asked cautiously. Helen shook her head. "I have my own life now. But I can visit you often, or you can come visit me," Chloe said eagerly. "Mom, we've cleared out the master bedroom for you." There's no need," Helen interrupted her. "I'm very happy living here. If you really want to make it up to me, just live your lives well and bring my grandson to see me often." That night, David's family stayed at Helen's house. Although the space was small, the atmosphere was warmer than it had ever been. Chloe insisted on helping her mother-in-law with the housework, while David sat with his mother, talking about everything that had happened over the past few months. Late at night, Helen held her sleeping grandson, softly humming a lullaby. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a gentle glow on the baby's face. She leaned down and kissed his forehead, her heart filled with a sense of peace and contentment. "Robert," she said silently in her heart, "I think I found a balance." The next morning, Helen and her son's family went to the restaurant they had booked to celebrate her grandson's 6-month birthday. During the meal, Chloe seemed to want to say something several times, and finally gathered the courage. "Mom, I would like to ask you to be the baby's first teacher. You teach so well." Helen looked at her daughter-in-law in surprise. You know about my teaching?" Chloe nodded. "David told me everything. You're amazing. I'm so ashamed of how I acted before." Helen's eyes welled up. She reached out and gently squeezed her daughter-in-law's hand. "Chloe, I don't blame you. From now on, let's start over, okay?" Chloe's tears fell again. "Mom." The meal was a happy one. Before they left, David quietly told his mother, "Mom, Chloe and I have decided. We're going to bring the baby to see you every weekend from now on. And you should come to our place whenever you have time." Helen nodded, her heart warm. She knew that true reconciliation would take time, but at least the first step had been taken. Back home, Helen sat at her desk and wrote in a new journal entry. July 15th. Clear. I saw my grandson today. He's grown so much and knows how to smile. David and Chloe seem to have truly changed. Robert, do you think I should forgive them completely? I'm not in a hurry. I'll wait and see. Tomorrow, I need to finish the painting for the exhibition. I think I'll call it Rebirth. After writing, she picked up her brush and began to sketch the outline of a new painting. The gentle moonlight fell on the paper, as if guiding her hand. This time, she not only painted the outline of a mountain landscape, but also a rainbow, a symbol of hope after the storm, and the new beginning of her life. The August sun beat down on the earth. Helen held a parasol and walked briskly towards the City Art Museum. Today was the opening ceremony of the Retired Teachers Art Exhibition, and her painting, Rebirth, was displayed in a prominent position. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from her son. "Mom, we're at the gallery. Where are you?" A small smile played on Helen's lips. Since their reconciliation at the party last month, David's family had been visiting her every week, sometimes even staying the night. Although Chloe still showed flashes of her old self, her attitude had improved immensely. "Almost there," she replied simply. The entrance to the museum was crowded. From a distance, Helen spotted her son's family. David was dressed in a formal shirt and slacks, while Chloe stood in the shade, holding the baby. Her 6-month-old grandson was dressed in a cute little shirt, his big eyes looking around curiously. "Mom!" David saw her and hurried over. You look so vibrant today. Helen was wearing a pale green traditional dress she had bought 20 years ago, but never had the chance to wear. She had even asked a friend from her cosmetology class at the community college to help her with some light makeup. "Grandma," Chloe said, walking over with the baby, a little shyly. It was the first time she had called Helen Grandma instead of Mom like her husband did. Helen's heart warmed. She reached out and took her grandson. "Hello, baby. Did you miss Grandma?" The baby giggled in her arms, his little hands grabbing her pearl necklace and not letting go. This small act of affection brought tears to Helen's eyes. The last time she saw him, he had been shy and withdrawn. "Mom, let's go inside," David said softly. "We don't want to be late." The gallery was cool and filled with visitors. Helen's painting, Rebirth, had already attracted a small crowd who were discussing it in low voices. Holding her grandson, she stood quietly with her son and daughter-in-law at the edge of the crowd. "The use of empty space in this painting is just brilliant," an elderly man with glasses exclaimed. "And that rainbow, it seems so effortless, yet it's a stroke of genius." "I agree," someone next to him added. "I heard the artist is a retired teacher who only started painting 6 months ago." 6 months? "Impossible," the elderly man said in disbelief. "This level of brushwork takes at least 10 years of practice." Helen felt her face flush. She was about to slip away when Carol spotted her. "Helen, there you are," Carol called out loudly. "Come over here. Professor Davis wants to meet you." Her voice drew everyone's attention. Helen had no choice but to walk forward, handing her grandson back to Chloe. "This is the artist of Rebirth, Mrs. Helen Miller," Carol introduced her warmly. Before she retired, she was the head of the English department at the county high school. The man with the glasses, Professor Davis, looked at Helen in surprise. "Mrs. Miller, have you really only been painting for 6 months?" Helen nodded modestly. "Yes, I just started at the community college this past March." "A genius," Professor Davis said excitedly. "Your intuitive understanding of the medium is extraordinary. Have you ever considered teaching at the university?" The surrounding crowd gasped in amazement, all looking at Helen with admiration. David and Chloe stood to the side, their expressions a mix of surprise and pride. "Thank you for your generous offer," Helen politely declined. "But I'm still in the learning phase. I'm afraid." "You're too humble," Professor Davis insisted. "How about this? We have a new ink painting symposium next week. You must come." Faced with his enthusiastic invitation, Helen couldn't refuse and agreed. For the next hour, she was constantly surrounded by visitors asking about her creative process and her experience learning to paint. Her family stayed by her side the entire time. David's expression grew more and more proud, and the way Chloe looked at her mother-in-law was now filled with respect. At the reception luncheon, Helen was seated at the main table with Professor Davis and other prominent figures from the art world. David and his family were at the next table. "Mom is amazing," Chloe whispered to her husband. "All those famous artists respect her so much." David nodded, his eyes shining. "My mom was always an outstanding teacher. It's just, we never took it seriously." Halfway through the luncheon, Helen suddenly felt dizzy. She thought it was just the stuffy room and quietly stood up to go to the restroom to splash some water on her face. But as soon as she stood, her vision went black, and she collapsed forward. "Mom!" David's cry echoed from a distance. It was the last thing she heard before she lost consciousness. When she woke up, Helen found herself in a hospital bed with an IV in her hand. David was sitting by her bedside, his eyes red. Chloe was in the hallway, anxiously talking on the phone while holding the baby. "Mom? You're awake?" David squeezed her hand, his voice filled with relief. "You scared us to death." Helen tried to speak, but found her throat was parched. David quickly poured her a glass of water and carefully helped her take a sip. What happened to me?" she asked weakly. "The doctor said it was an exhaustion response, brought on by overwork and long-term emotional stress," David said, his voice cracking. "You need to be hospitalized for a few days for observation." Only then did Helen notice her son's red, swollen eyes. He had clearly been crying. She gently patted his hand. "It's nothing." I'm just a little tired. No, Mom. David shook his head, tears welling up again. The doctor said this was caused by long-term suppressed emotions and exhaustion. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Just then, Chloe came in with the baby. Seeing her mother-in-law awake, her eyes immediately reddened. Grandma, are you feeling better? Helen smiled and nodded. Much better. Don't worry. Chloe handed the baby to her husband and suddenly knelt by the hospital bed. Grandma, I'm so sorry. This is all because of me. Helen was startled and quickly reached out to help her up. Chloe, get up. What are you doing? No. Chloe refused to get up, tears streaming down her face. If it weren't for how we treated you before, you wouldn't. The doctor said this was caused by long-term stress. It's all my fault. David also choked up. Mom, we really know we were wrong. While you're in the hospital, please let us take care of you. Seeing her son and daughter-in-law's remorseful faces, Helen felt a mix of emotions. She said softly, Get up. I don't blame you. I need to rest now. You should take the baby home. No, Mom, David insisted. I'm staying here with you. Me too, Chloe said, wiping her tears. My mom can help with the baby for a few days. Helen was about to say something else when the doctor came in. Seeing the patient was awake, he did a brief examination and then said seriously, Family members, please come with me. David and Chloe nervously followed the doctor out of the room. Helen lay in the hospital bed, staring at the white ceiling, her mind racing. She never expected to collapse at the art exhibition, nor did she expect her son and daughter-in-law to react so strongly. It seemed they had truly changed. Half an hour later, David returned with red eyes. Chloe was outside, comforting the crying baby. Mom, David's voice trembled. The doctor said you need to rest and recuperate properly. You can't overexert yourself anymore. And he couldn't go on. Helen asked calmly, What else? The doctor said your long-term emotional stress has affected your immune system. David finally broke down and cried. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm really not human. Helen sighed and reached out to wipe her son's tears. David, stop crying. I don't blame you. But, no buts. Helen interrupted him gently. Let the past be the past. I just want to rest now. You should go home. David wanted to insist, but seeing his mother's exhausted face, he finally nodded. Then, I'll come see you first thing in the morning. After her family left, Helen finally allowed herself to cry. She wasn't not sad, she just didn't want to show it in front of her son. The years of grievances and heartache couldn't be erased by a few apologies. But seeing her son's remorse, she couldn't bring herself to blame him any longer. The next morning, David arrived on time as promised, bringing with him a thermos of homemade millet porridge. Mom, I made it just like you taught me, he said cautiously. See if it tastes right. Helen took a sip and nodded. It's cooked just right. David breathed a sigh of relief, a smile appearing on his face. That's good. Mom, you don't know. I was tossing and turning all last night, just thinking about you all these years. David, Helen interrupted him gently. Let's not talk about the past. No, Mom, David insisted. I have to. Last night I read all of your journals. Only then did I realize how hard it's been for you. After Dad passed away, you raised me all by yourself, put me through college, and His voice choked up again. Helen patted her son's hand. It's all in the past. It's not, David said emotionally. Mom, did you know? Last night, Chloe cried for half the night too. She said she finally understands why the baby isn't close to her because she doesn't know how to be a mother. Not like you. Just then, Chloe walked in with the baby. Her eyes were red and swollen. She had clearly been crying too. Grandma, she said softly, I brought you some fruit. Helen smiled and nodded. Thank you. Just put it over there. Chloe put down the fruit, hesitated for a moment, and then said suddenly, Grandma, I want to learn how to take care of a baby from you. Can you teach me? Helen looked at her daughter-in-law in surprise. You want to learn? Chloe nodded, tears welling up in her eyes again. Last night, the baby was crying, and I couldn't soothe him no matter what I did. Then, David used the method you taught him. gently patting his back and humming a song, and the baby actually quieted down. She sobbed. I realized then that I don't know how to be a mother at all. Helen's heart softened. Here, give me the baby. Chloe quickly handed her grandson over. Helen took the baby, gently patting his back and humming an old lullaby. Miraculously, the baby, who had been fussing just moments before, quickly calmed down, looking up at his grandmother with wide, curious eyes. See? Helen said softly. It's not that the baby is being naughty, it's that he needs to feel secure. When you hold him, your hand should be like this. She demonstrated the correct posture. Chloe watched intently, her eyes full of admiration. Grandma, you're amazing. For the next few days, David and Chloe took turns taking care of Helen at the hospital. Chloe's transformation was particularly noticeable. She was no longer as spoiled as before, but instead, she proactively learned all sorts of parenting skills and even asked her mother-in-law for cooking tips. Grandma, she asked one day, her face blushing, can you teach me how to make that sweet rice pudding? I want to learn. Helen looked at her in surprise. But you don't like sweet things. David loves it, Chloe said softly. I want to make it for him. A warmth spread through Helen's heart. She nodded. Okay, I'll teach you when I get out of the hospital. A week later, the doctor finally allowed Helen to be discharged, but with strict instructions to rest for a month and not to overexert herself. Mom, please come home with us, David pleaded. We'll take good care of you. Chloe also nodded eagerly. Yes, Grandma, we've cleaned out the master bedroom for you. Helen shook her head. I'll be fine at my own home. You can just come visit me when you have time. Seeing his mother's firm stance, David had to give in. Then, I'll come see you every day after work. Back in her own home, lying in her familiar bed, Helen let out a long sigh of relief. The antiseptic smell of the hospital was finally replaced by the comforting scent of tea in her own home, which made her feel incredibly at peace. The doorbell rang. It was Carol and a few friends from the community college who had come to visit with flowers, fruit, and handmade cards from the students. Helen, you gave us such a scare, Carol said, holding her hand. When you collapsed at the art exhibition, Professor Davis was so worried. Helen smiled apologetically. I'm sorry for causing so much trouble. Don't say that, Carol shook her head. Did you know? Your painting, Rebirth, was acquired by the City Art Museum. Professor Davis personally recommended it. What? Helen sat up in surprise. How? How is that possible? It's true, another teacher said excitedly. The museum paid a $500 acquisition fee for it. Helen was speechless. Her painting had been acquired by a museum. It felt like a dream. Just then, the doorbell rang again. It was David's family, carrying bags of groceries. Mom, we're here to see you, David said cheerfully. Chloe said she wants to show off her cooking skills. Chloe walked into the kitchen with a blush, while David sat beside his mother with the baby. Mom, I heard your painting was acquired by the museum. That's amazing. I ran into Mr. Peterson downstairs, and he told me. Helen smiled and nodded. Yes, Carol just told me. Mom, I'm so proud to have a mother like you, David said sincerely. Really? That sentence brought tears to Helen's eyes again. She reached out and stroked her son's face, saying softly, I'm proud of you too. The clatter of pots and pans came from the kitchen. Chloe was clumsily making dinner, with David's helpless instructions echoing from time to time. Chloe, the heat is too high. No, less salt. Helen leaned back on the sofa, listening to the familiar yet new sounds of a family home, a smile unconsciously forming on her lips. This is what a home should sound like. The dinner, though simple, was filled with love. It was Chloe's first time cooking, and the dishes were either too salty or too bland. But Helen ate with great relish. Grandma, if it doesn't taste good, just tell me, Chloe said, embarrassed. I'll do better next time. Helen shook her head. It's delicious. Really. After dinner, David insisted on clearing the dishes, and Chloe poured her mother-in-law a cup of hot tea. Watching her son and daughter-in-law bustling around, Helen suddenly felt that getting sick had been worth it. That evening, after her family left, Helen sat at her desk and wrote in a new journal entry. August 20th. Clear. I came home from the hospital today. David and Chloe's changes have made me so happy. Robert, do you think this was a blessing in disguise? My painting was acquired by the art museum. I never would have dreamed it. The doctor said I need to rest for a month, which gives me the perfect opportunity to organize my teaching notes. After writing, she picked up her brush and lightly sketched a new composition on a piece of paper. An elderly woman lying in bed, surrounded by her devoted children, with bright sunlight streaming in from the window outside. She titled the painting, "Comfort in Sickness." The autumn sun streamed through the sheer curtains into the bedroom. Helen leaned against the headboard, reading a painting textbook that Mr. Peterson had brought her. It had been 2 weeks since she was discharged from the hospital, and she was only halfway through her prescribed rest period. But she felt much better already. The doorbell rang. She put down her book and slowly went to open it. David stood outside, carrying several bags, with beads of sweat on his forehead. "Mom," he said, out of breath, "I brought you some health supplements and some cookies Chloe made." Helen let her son in and watched as he busily unpacked the items: herbal jellies, dates, walnuts, and a box of cookies that looked a little misshapen but smelled delicious. "Chloe has been really into baking lately," David said, embarrassed. "They don't look great, but they taste okay." Helen tried a cookie and nodded. They're baked just right." David breathed a sigh of relief, a smile spreading across his face. "That's good. Mom, how are you feeling today?" "Much better," Helen replied with a smile. "You don't have to come see me every day. You're so busy with work." "Not at all, not at all," David said quickly. "The company has been—" He stopped abruptly, his expression awkward. Helen keenly sensed that something was wrong. "What's wrong with the company?" David hesitated for a moment before finally confessing. "Well, the company is facing some difficulties. A major client suddenly canceled their order, and our cash flow is a little tight." Helen frowned. "Is it serious?" "It's manageable," David said, forcing a smile. "I'm working on it." Seeing her son trying to put on a brave face, Helen's heart ached. She knew that starting a business had been tough for him, and he had done it all on his own, never complaining to her. "David," she said softly, "if there's anything Mom can do to help, just say the word." David shook his head. "Mom, you just focus on getting better." His phone suddenly rang. He glanced at it, and his face fell. "Sorry, Mom, I have to take this." He walked out to the balcony and spoke in a low voice for a few minutes. When he came back, he looked even more distressed. "What's wrong?" Helen asked with concern. "It's nothing," David said, forcing a smile. "It's just some trouble with the loan." Just as Helen was about to press for more details, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Carol, holding a bouquet of flowers. "Helen, I came to see you," Carol said with a smile, then noticed David. "Oh, your son is here." David greeted her politely. "Hello, Carol." Carol looked at David and suddenly asked, "Don't you own a building materials company?" David nodded in surprise. "Yes, I do. How did you know?" "I heard about it from Professor Davis," Carol said with a smile. "Professor Davis's nephew owns a construction company, and they're in need of a large supply of building materials right now." David's eyes lit up. "Really? Let me ask for you," Carol said, taking out her phone. "Professor Davis has always admired your mother's paintings. I'm sure he'd be happy to help." Helen felt a little embarrassed. "Isn't that too much to ask?" "What's the big deal?" Carol was already dialing. The art world runs on connections, too. 10 minutes later, David hung up the phone, his face flushed with excitement. "Mom, Mr. Thompson agreed to meet with me tomorrow. He said his aunt talks about you all the time." Only then did Helen remember that Professor Davis had indeed mentioned his nephew was in construction, but she never thought it would be such a coincidence. "David, this is a great opportunity," she said softly. "Make the most of it." David nodded vigorously, his eyes welling up with tears. "Mom, thank you." Why are you thanking me?" Helen patted her son's hand. It was Carol who helped. Carol smiled and shook her head. "It was your own good karma, Helen. You've taught so many students and helped so many people. Now it's time for you to reap the rewards. After seeing Carol and her son off, Helen sat on the balcony, watching the evening clouds, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She never imagined that her casual hobby could end up helping her son at such a crucial moment. It reminded her of the old saying, "What goes around, comes around." The next day at noon, David called, his voice filled with excitement. "Mom, we got the deal. Not only did Mr. Thompson sign the contract, but he also paid a 30% deposit up front. The company is saved." Helen smiled with relief. "That's wonderful." "Mom," Mr. Thompson said. "He said you're his aunt's favorite artist." David's voice was filled with disbelief. He even said he remembered being in one of your classes when he was a little boy." Helen was stunned for a moment. "My class?" "Yes," he said 20 years ago. "You taught a demonstration class at his elementary school, and he still remembers it to this day." Only then did Helen recall the incident. As an outstanding teacher in the county, she had often been asked to teach demonstration classes at various schools. She never thought that one of those little students would grow up to be a successful entrepreneur and help her son in his time of need. "Mom," David's voice suddenly choked up, "I never knew how amazing you are." Helen's eyes also welled up. "Don't be silly. I'm just an ordinary teacher." "No, Mom," David said firmly. "You're the mother I'm most proud of." Mr. Thompson said his aunt wants to invite you to participate in the International Senior Art Exhibition next month. You're painting. After hanging up, Helen sat at her desk, unable to calm down for a long time. She opened her journal, wanting to record the day's events, but didn't know where to begin. In the end, she just wrote a single line. September 5th, clear. David's company crisis is over. Robert, are you watching from heaven? A week later, Helen's rest period ended, and the doctor allowed her to resume normal activities. The first thing she did was visit the community college. She had missed the teachers and students there dearly. As soon as she stepped onto campus, she was greeted with a round of cheers. Carol and a group of students were waiting for her, holding a banner that read, "Welcome back, Mrs. Miller." "Helen, we missed you so much." "Helen, without you, our painting has been so uninspired." "Helen, look, has my painting improved?" Faced with their warm welcome, Helen was moved to tears. Carol took her hand and said, "Helen, while you were gone, everyone was asking about you every day. Mr. Peterson was especially concerned." Just then, Mr. Peterson hurried over. Seeing Helen, his face lit up. "Helen, you're finally back." Helen smiled and nodded. "Hello, Mr. Peterson. Thank you for your concern during this time." "Don't be so formal." He waved his hand. "By the way, Professor Davis asked me to tell you that everything for the International Senior Art Exhibition has been arranged. It opens on the 15th of next month, and 2 of your paintings will be on display." Helen was surprised. "2? But I only submitted 1. "Professor Davis took the liberty of submitting your comfort in sickness as well," Mr. Peterson said with a smile. "He said that painting was particularly moving." Helen felt a little embarrassed. "But that was just a rough sketch." "Don't say that," Carol chimed in. "We've all seen that painting, and it's incredibly touching. My daughter even cried when she saw it, saying it reminded her of her grandmother." At noon, the community college held a small welcome party for Helen. During the party, Mr. Peterson announced a piece of good news. The school had decided to officially hire Helen as a part-time instructor for the painting class, teaching 2 classes a week. "Helen, please don't refuse," Mr. Peterson said sincerely. "The students all want to learn from you. Please do it for them." Faced with everyone's expectant gazes, Helen finally nodded in agreement. And so, she began the second teaching career of her life, only this time she was teaching painting, not English. When she got home that afternoon, she found David and Chloe waiting at her door. Chloe was holding a cake that said, "Happy birthday and long life to Grandma." "Mom," David said excitedly, "I heard you're an official teacher now. Mr. Peterson just called me. He said the students are overjoyed." Helen was surprised. "How does Mr. Peterson have your number?" "Well," David scratched his head, embarrassed. "After the thing with Mr. Thompson, I got his contact information." Chloe also blushed and said, "Grandma, I signed up for the baking class at the community college too. I want to spend more time with you." Helen's eyes welled up. She never thought that her own transformation would inspire such a change in her son and daughter-in-law. This was better than the best ending she could have imagined. After dinner, David suddenly said with great solemnity, "Mom, Chloe and I have something we want to discuss with you." Helen looked at her son, puzzled. "What is it?" We're thinking of moving back to this town," David said cautiously. "We can rent out the condo in the city and rent a place here." Helen was stunned. Why the sudden change? "It's not sudden," David said softly. "Ever since you got sick, I've been thinking. Life is short. I don't want to miss any more time with you." Chloe also nodded. "Yes, Grandma, and the baby loves being with you. I want him to spend more time with you." Helen was deeply moved. She looked at the sincere expressions on their faces and knew they were truly sorry. "But what about your jobs?" She hesitated. "Most of my company's business can be done online now," David explained. "And this town isn't that far from the city. If I need to, I can drive there in an hour." "Me too," Chloe added. "I run an online business now, so I can work from anywhere." Helen thought for a moment and then said softly, "If you've made up your minds, I support you." But then she looked at her son. "Don't do this just for me." "We're not," David said firmly. "Mom, this is our decision. You don't know. I've done a lot of thinking these past few months." That night, David and Chloe stayed late, discussing their moving plans in detail and even starting to look at rental listings in town. Helen didn't interfere much, only offering advice when they asked. Before bed, she wrote in her journal, September 15th. Clear. Today is the beginning of my new life. David and Chloe said they want to move back. Robert, do you think I should be happy? For some reason, I'm both excited and scared. Tomorrow is my first official class. I need to prepare well. Putting down her pen, she looked out at the bright moon and suddenly remembered something her late husband used to say, "Helen, the best days are yet to come." On a crisp October day, the town's cultural square was bustling with people. Helen stood at the booth for the silver-haired teacher's community classroom, patiently guiding a few local children on how to hold a calligraphy brush. This was the first major community event she had helped organize since her recovery, and it had attracted over 20 retired teachers from all over the county. "Grandma!" a young voice called from behind her. Helen turned to see Chloe holding their son, with David following behind, carrying a water bottle and snacks. "What are you guys doing here?" she asked, pleasantly surprised, taking her grandson into her arms. The 10-month-old could now say Grandma and was affectionately hugging her neck. "Mom, you've been busy all morning," David said, handing her the water bottle. "Have some water and take a break." Chloe also thoughtfully offered her a snack. "Grandma, I made some new walnut cookies. You should try them." Helen took the water bottle, her heart filled with warmth. Since her son's family had moved back a month ago, such heartwarming scenes had become a daily occurrence. Although their rental house was a short distance away, David brought his wife and son to visit her almost every day. "Helen, is this your son and daughter-in-law?" Carol asked, walking over with a smile. Helen nodded, introducing them with pride. "Yes, this is my son, David, my daughter-in-law, Chloe, and my little grandson." "What a happy family," Carol remarked. "Your son is so devoted. He's already been here 3 times this morning." David scratched his head, embarrassed. "Hello, Carol. My mom just recovered, so I'm worried she'll get too tired." I understand, Carol said with a smile. "By the way, Helen, Professor Davis just called. He said the invitation for the International Senior Art Exhibition has arrived at the school. You can pick it up whenever you have time." "What art exhibition?" David asked curiously. Helen briefly explained, and David immediately became excited. "Mom, that's such a big deal. Why didn't you tell us sooner? When is it? Chloe and I will definitely be there to support you." "The 15th of next month," Helen said softly. "At the State Art Museum." "That's fantastic," David exclaimed. "Mom, you're amazing. An international exhibition?" Chloe also looked at her with admiration. "Grandma, can you teach me how to paint? I want to learn too." Seeing her son and daughter-in-law's sincere praise and respect, Helen's eyes grew misty. A year ago, she was the unwelcome, old-fashioned woman in her son's home. Now, She was the mother and mother-in-law they were proud of. This was a transformation she had never dared to dream of. After the event, David insisted on driving his mother home. On the way, he said suddenly, "Mom, Chloe and I have something we want to discuss with you." "What is it?" Helen asked. We're thinking of buying a house," David said cautiously. "There's a new development in town. The environment is nice, and it's close to you." Helen nodded. "That's great. Do you have enough money?" "Yes," David said quickly. "Since we got the contract from Mr. Thompson, the company has been doing very well, and—" He hesitated. "We're thinking of selling the condo in the city." Helen was taken aback. "Sell it?" "Yes," David explained softly. "That place has too many bad memories. Chloe and I want to start fresh." Helen understood her son's intention and gently patted his hand. "You two should do what you think is best." "Mom," David's voice suddenly choked up. You don't blame us?" "Silly child," Helen said with a smile. "Why would I blame you? Seeing you two like this now makes me very happy." Back home, David and Chloe insisted on helping with dinner. Watching her son skillfully chopping vegetables and her daughter-in-law diligently learning how to make soup, Helen felt as if she were in a different world. On this very day a year ago, she had been sleeping on the floor in the hallway of her son's home, enduring their coldness and disdain. "Grandma, the soup is ready. Have a taste," Chloe said, carefully ladling a bowl of soup. "I made it just like you taught me." Helen took a sip and nodded. It's just right." A bright smile bloomed on Chloe's face, like a schoolgirl who had just received an award. This daughter-in-law, who had once been so difficult, was now overjoyed by a simple word of praise. After dinner, David suddenly presented her with an exquisite box. "Mom, this is for you." Helen opened the box to find a high-quality set of calligraphy brushes, ink, and paper, along with a beautifully carved inkstone. "We heard you're participating in an international exhibition," David said, embarrassed. "Chloe and I wanted to give you a proper gift." Helen's eyes welled up. She gently stroked the intricate patterns on the inkstone and noticed a few small words carved in the corner. "To the greatest mother in the world." "You!" She was too choked up to speak. David, his eyes red, knelt before his mother. "Mom, I know that no amount of apologies can make up for my mistakes, but please believe me, I truly know I was wrong." Chloe also knelt down. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I was so immature before." Helen quickly helped them up. Get up. Let the past be the past." That night, David and Chloe stayed late, discussing their house-buying plans in detail and even inviting her to help them choose a floor plan. Helen didn't interfere much, only offering advice when they asked. Before bed, she wrote in her journal, "October 20th. Clear. Today, David said they're going to sell the condo in the city. Robert, do you think this means a true new beginning? I have the international exhibition next month. I'm a little nervous. Mr. Peterson said he has a surprise for me today. So mysterious." Putting down her pen, she looked out at the bright moon and suddenly remembered the night she had been kicked out of her home. The moon that night had also been this full, this bright. By mid-November, the International Senior Art Exhibition was in full swing. Helen's two paintings, Rebirth and Comfort in Sickness, were displayed in a prominent position and had attracted many visitors. "Mrs. Miller, this is Mr. Yamamoto, a curator from Japan," Professor Davis introduced them warmly. "He is a great admirer of your work." Mr. Yamamoto bowed respectfully. "Mrs. Miller, your paintings are full of the power of life and the light of wisdom. I am deeply impressed." Helen returned the bow modestly. "You are too kind. I am just a beginner." "No," Mr. Yamamoto said seriously. "Art is not about technique, but about the soul. Your paintings have stories, have life. That is the most precious thing." As they were talking, David's family hurried over. Seeing his mother being praised by an international curator, David's face was filled with pride. "Mom, sorry we're late," he said, out of breath. "There was a lot of traffic." "It's all right," Helen said, smiling as she introduced them. "This is my son's family." Mr. Yamamoto greeted them politely and then said to Helen, "Mrs. Miller, we are having a joint exhibition of Asian senior artists in Tokyo next March. I would be honored if you would participate. Tokyo? David almost shouted. Mom, that's amazing. Helen hesitated. I'll have to think about it. No rush, mister, Yamamoto said, handing her his business card. I look forward to hearing from you. After the exhibition, Professor Davis invited Helen and her family to lunch. During the meal, he said suddenly, Helen, I have a favor to ask. Please, go ahead, Helen responded politely. I would like to invite you to be the art consultant for our silver-haired teacher's community classroom, Professor Davis said sincerely. The project has received government funding, and we can offer a small stipend to the consultant. Helen was about to decline when David interjected, Mom, you should accept. It's such a great opportunity. Chloe also nodded eagerly. Yes, Grandma, you teach so well. More people should benefit from it. Seeing the expectant looks on their faces, Helen finally agreed. Professor Davis was overjoyed. That's wonderful. We have a planning meeting next Monday. You must come. On the way home, David was already excitedly making plans. Mom, I'll definitely go with you to the exhibition in Tokyo. My company isn't busy in March. Chloe also chimed in. I can help take care of the baby. You and David can go without any worries. Helen listened to their plans with a smile, her heart warm. A year ago, she was a despised, superfluous old woman. Now, she was an artist and teacher her family was proud of. This was a transformation she had never dared to dream of. By the end of December, it was Helen's 63rd birthday. David had called early in the morning, saying he had a surprise for her. Mom, will you be home around noon? He asked mysteriously. Yes, Helen replied curiously. What's going on? Nothing. We're just coming over for a bit, David said with a laugh. Don't go out. After hanging up, Helen sat on the balcony, watching the snow fall, her mind filled with a whirlwind of thoughts. So much had changed this year. She had rediscovered her artistic dream, organized a community classroom, received an invitation to an international exhibition, and most importantly, she had regained her son's love and respect. The doorbell rang. Helen opened the door to find David's family, Mr. Peterson, Carol, and a group of friends from the community college standing outside, holding a cake and gifts. Happy birthday! They all shouted in unison. Helen was so moved she couldn't speak. David stepped forward and hugged his mother. Happy birthday, Mom. We prepared a little party for you. Chloe also shyly handed her a gift. Grandma, this is a scarf I knitted for you. I hope you like it. The party lasted all afternoon. They ate cake, chatted, and admired Helen's new works. The atmosphere was warm and lively. Mr. Peterson even brought some good news. The community college had decided to establish the Helen Miller Painting Studio next semester, specifically for teaching painting to retirees. Helen, don't you dare refuse, Mr. Peterson said with a laugh. The students are all waiting to learn from you. Helen looked at everyone in surprise. This is too sudden. Not at all, Carol chimed in. You teach so well. You should have had your own studio a long time ago. David proudly put his arm around his mother's shoulders. Mom, you're amazing. After the party, David's family stayed behind to help her clean up. Watching her son bustling about, Helen suddenly said, David, I have something I want to discuss with you. What is it? David asked, stopping what he was doing. I'm thinking of renovating the old house, Helen said softly. You bought a new house, right? When you bring the baby over to play in the future, this place will be too old. David and Chloe looked at each other and suddenly smiled. Mom, we were just about to talk to you about that. What is it? Helen asked, puzzled. We didn't buy a new house, David said, embarrassed. We want to live with you. Helen was stunned. What? Mom, hear me out, David explained eagerly. We looked at a lot of houses, but none of them felt right. Then Chloe and I talked it over. And instead of buying a new house, we thought, why not renovate your house and we can all live together? Chloe also nodded eagerly. Yes, Grandma, that way you won't be living alone, and we can take care of you every day, and the baby can see you every day too. Helen's eyes welled up. You've really thought this through? We have, David said firmly. Mom, you've done so much for us. Now it's our turn to take care of you. Looking at their sincere faces, Helen finally nodded. Okay, okay. That night, after her family left, Helen sat at her desk and wrote the final entry in her journal. December 31st. Snowing. Today is my 63rd birthday, and also the happiest day of this year. They said they want to move back in. Robert, are you watching from heaven? Our home is going to be lively again. Tomorrow is a new year. I suddenly feel that it's never too late to start living. Putting down her pen, she looked out at the falling snow and suddenly remembered the night she had been kicked out of her home. The snow that night had also been this white, this pure. The spring sun streamed through the new floor-to-ceiling windows into the living room. Helen sat in her rocking chair, carefully looking over her students' painting assignments. This was the first batch of students from her Helen Miller painting studio, all of them retirees over the age of 60. Grandma, her 3-year-old grandson, came running in, holding up a piece of paper with a colorful scribble on it. Look at the fish I drew. Helen put down the assignments and took her grandson's artwork, studying it seriously. The lines have so much energy, and this tail, it's drawn so vividly. The little boy beamed with pride. Grandma, teach me how to draw even better. All right, Helen smiled, picking up a brush. Come, Grandma will teach you. This was the spring of 2026, a full 3 years after the night she had been kicked out of her home. The Helen of today was no longer the timid, submissive mother-in-law of the past, but a well-known senior artist and community teacher in the county. Mom, we're home! David's voice came from the doorway. He and Chloe walked in, carrying shopping bags, their faces beaming with happiness. Grandma, Chloe said, putting down the bags and affectionately hugging her mother-in-law's shoulders. Guess what? My bakery was just named the best dessert shop in town. Really? That's wonderful, Helen said with delight. It's all because you taught me so well, Chloe said with a blush. If you hadn't been so patient, David also added proudly, Mom, Chloe is a local celebrity now. Even the TV station came to interview her. Seeing her son and daughter-in-law so happy, Helen's heart was filled with warmth. 3 years ago, she never would have dreamed of having a life like this. Her son's business was thriving. Her daughter-in-law's bakery was a success. Her grandson was bright and adorable, and she herself had found a new purpose in her later years. Oh, by the way, Mom, David took a letter out of his bag. The invitation for the Tokyo exhibition. Mr. Yamamoto sent it personally. Helen took the envelope and gently stroked the exquisite postage stamp. It's been 3 years already. That international exhibition 3 years ago had been the beginning of her artistic journey. The subsequent trip to Tokyo had allowed her to meet many like-minded senior artists. After returning home, with the support of the county government, she had organized the Silver-Haired Teachers Community Classroom, providing free art education for local children and seniors. Grandma, are you going to Tokyo again? Her grandson asked, looking up at her. Helen stroked his head. Not this time. Grandma has to prepare for a new exhibition. Mom, David said, handing her a cup of tea. Are you ready for the County Cultural Festival next week? Helen nodded. All the pieces have been selected. This time, we're mainly showcasing the students' work. I only have 2 new pieces in the show. Mrs. Miller has students all over the county now, Chloe said with a laugh. Yesterday at the supermarket, an old lady even recognized me as your daughter-in-law. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Mr. Peterson and Carol, holding a delicate scroll. Helen, Mr. Peterson said excitedly. Good news! Your Life series has been selected by the Provincial Art Museum to be part of this year's Sunset Glow Senior Artist Joint Exhibition. Helen took the scroll in surprise. Really? But I was just painting for fun. You're too humble, Carol said with a smile. The curator said your paintings show the depth and breadth of life in old age and are a rare masterpiece in recent years. David hugged his mother excitedly. Mom, you're amazing. Chloe also quickly took out her phone. I have to post this on Facebook and let everyone know I have an artist for a mother-in-law. Seeing everyone's joyful faces, Helen's eyes grew misty. 3 years ago, she was a despised, superfluous old woman. Now, she was an artist and teacher everyone admired. This was a transformation she had never dared to dream of. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Helen sat alone on the balcony, looking at the starry sky, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. In these 3 years, she had not only rediscovered her artistic dream, but also helped many other seniors like herself regain their confidence in life. Her community classroom had helped hundreds of children and seniors, and her painting studio had produced its first batch of silver-haired artists. Her phone vibrated. It was the community college's group chat. The students were excitedly discussing the preparations for next week's cultural festival. Helen looked at the lively messages, a smile unconsciously forming on her lips. These students, in their 60s and 70s, were now full of energy, even more so than young people. "Robert," she whispered to the starry sky, "do you see this? I'm living a good life." The next morning, Helen took her grandson to the park to sketch. The spring park was full of life, with people everywhere enjoying the fine weather. A few old ladies saw her and greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller. Out painting again today?" Helen smiled and nodded. "Yes, bringing my grandson out to experience nature." "Grandma," her grandson suddenly pointed into the distance. "Butterflies." Helen looked in the direction he was pointing and saw several colorful butterflies fluttering among the flowers. She quickly took out her sketchbook and taught her grandson how to capture the beautiful moment. "Helen!" a familiar voice called out. Helen turned to see Brenda walking quickly towards her. "I knew I'd find you here, Brenda." Helen smiled in greeting. "It's been a while." "It sure has," Brenda said, catching her breath. "My daughter moved to the city and insisted I go with her, but it's not as comfortable as our little town." She looked at Helen's painting, then at her well-behaved grandson, and suddenly sighed. "Helen, you're really living your best life now. Remember 3 years ago? The trouble you had at your son's place? Who would have thought you'd be here today?" Helen smiled and nodded. "Yes, life is strange. If you ask me." Brenda lowered her voice. "You're doing much better than them now. Your son and daughter-in-law probably have to walk on eggshells around you, right?" Helen shook her head. "Brenda, it's not like that. We're a family. We respect and love each other. No one is walking on eggshells." Brenda was stunned for a moment, then it dawned on her. Right, I misspoke. It's really good that you're all like this now." On the way home, her grandson suddenly asked, "Grandma, why does everyone like you so much?" Helen knelt down and gently stroked his face. "Because Grandma learned to love herself, and also learned to love others. Remember, sweetie, only when you respect yourself will others respect you." The little boy nodded, though he didn't fully understand. Then he suddenly threw his arms around his grandmother's neck. "I love Grandma the most." Helen's eyes welled up. She hugged her grandson tightly, feeling the warmth and love from this little life. This feeling of being needed and loved was the most precious gift of her later years. A week later, the County Cultural Festival was held as scheduled. Helen's and her students' works attracted a large crowd, and the county TV station even did a special interview with her, calling her a model for a fulfilling senior life. "Mrs. Miller," the young host asked curiously, "how did you achieve such success in your later years?" Helen looked at the camera and said calmly, "It's not success. It's growth. A woman should live for herself at any age. When you shine your own light, the world will treat you with kindness." This quote was later made into a banner and hung on the wall of the community college, inspiring more and more seniors to bravely pursue their dreams. After the festival, David's family took Helen to a newly opened restaurant to celebrate. During the meal, David raised his glass and said emotionally, "Mom, thank you for teaching us how to live and how to love. I'm so proud to have a mother like you." Chloe also said with red eyes, "Grandma, thank you for your tolerance and guidance. Without you, I wouldn't be who I am today." Helen smiled at her happy family and said softly, "I should thank you too. You are the ones who have made my later years so wonderful." On the way home, her grandson fell asleep in her arms. Helen gently stroked his little face and suddenly remembered the rainy night she had been kicked out of her home 3 years ago. At that time, she thought her life was over, but she never expected that it was just a new beginning. "Mom," David said softly, "next week is the anniversary of Dad's passing. Let's go visit his grave together." Helen nodded. "Okay, bring his favorite pastries." David's voice was choked. "I want to tell Dad that I'm taking good care of you." Helen patted her son's hand. Your father is watching from heaven. He knows. Late at night, Helen sat at her desk, looking through her journals from the past 3 years. From the initial pain and despair to her later recovery and current happiness, every page recorded her journey. She picked up her pen and, on a new page, wrote, April 15th. Clear. The cultural festival was a great success. Robert, did you see it from heaven? Our grandson looks more and more like you, especially when he smiles. Life is truly amazing. 3 years ago, I thought it was all over, but it turned out to be a new beginning. I have new students in my studio tomorrow. I should get some rest. Closing the journal, she looked out at the bright moon. Tonight, the moon was exceptionally full and bright, just like her heart at this moment, complete, radiant, and filled with gratitude and love for life.